Hello, good evening, and welcome to step 56 in our walking tour through the Bible, and our third step, I think, through the book of Joshua. This step is three discrete chapters. It's very much self-contained unit. Chapters 3, 4, and 5. In my Jerusalem Bible, it's called the crossing of the Jordan. Now, what happens in these three chapters is that the Israelites cross the Jordan, as you would expect. But it's not just mere crossing of a not very impressive river. It's a action that is full of meaning, that looks backwards and that looks forwards. It looks backwards because there's a repetition of the miracle of the Red Sea. That is to say, as they're crossing the River Jordan, the priests go down into the Jordan holding the Ark of the Covenant, which is the presence of God, and the Jordan is stopped in its tracks. The waters that are going down to the Dead Sea are totally cut off, and upstream it floods, and the Israelites are able to cross dry shod, to use that phrase again, as they were able to cross the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea. Of course, back in the day in this Red Sea, they were being chased by Pharaoh and his troops. This time they're not being chased by Pharaoh and his troops. So what's the point of this miraculous crossing of the River Jordan? Well, it's two things. It is to show God's mighty power. It is to show God's mighty power to two diverse audiences. First of all, the people who live west of the Jordan, who are terrified when they hear of this demonstration of God's mighty power. It's also to show God's mighty power to the Israelites, because as the author makes clear, all the Israelites who saw the miracles in Egypt are dead. This is an entirely new generation. That's said at the beginning of the end of chapter 5. And indeed, to show that they're all a new generation, they renew the covenant, and we'll see more of this happens later, by being circumcised as soon as they cross the Jordan. So they enter the promised land, and they also enter into the covenant with the Lord once more. The covenant that was made for them on Sinai is now made once more for them in reality through the rite of circumcision. And of course, so what we have here really is, well, is it a repetition of the events of Exodus? I mean, at Exodus, we had the crossing of the Red Sea, and then we had the covenant at Sinai. Here we have the crossing of the Jordan and the circumcision at Gilgal, and also the setting up of the stones to mark the great event. Is this a repetition? Or, yes, it is a repetition. But a repetition in the sense of a representation. It shows that what happened at Sinai is still happening now, 40 years later. It's showing that what happens at Sinai was not just for a time only, but for all time. In other words, what happened at Sinai is an enduring reality. I see this crossing of the Jordan with the priests and obviously the Ark of the Covenant, which is later going to be placed in the temple, in attendance, as almost a liturgical reenactment of the events of Exodus. That is to say, it is a reenactment of those events. Those events take place a second time. Those events take place as they did once. They're not repeated. Well, they are repeated, but at the same time, we're not saying that the repetition is showing that the first time it didn't happen, and this time it really does happen. No, these events take place to remind us of the importance of the event that has taken place. And this has a sort of a liturgical meaning to it. Every time we go to Mass, we stand at the foot of the cross at Calvary, and every time we go to Mass, we are reminded of everything that Jesus Christ has done for us on Good Friday. So when we go to Mass, we go to Good Friday, we experience Good Friday, and we also experience Easter Sunday, the first Easter Sunday, the one enduring Easter Sunday. Of course, Jesus' sacrifice on the cross was once and for all, and that, of course, means once and for all people and once and for all time. And therefore, it's for us as much as it was for all the people who were actually there present on the first Good Friday. So what this is saying is that God's actions at the Red Sea and at Sinai were for all the people, including all future generations of the children of Israel. And these children of Israel who have not physically witnessed these things are marking this event as something they participated through the rite of the circumcision. And similarly, we participate in the event of Christ's saving mystery through the rite of baptism. It's our baptism which means we are saved by Christ. There are three very interesting chapters, and the 12 memorial stones are set up, and apparently Gilgal is a place where there was a stone circle, and this is the place where they cross into the um, promised land, and this is the place where generations would have come and said, oh yes, this is a stone circle, and this is what it means. In other words, this place would have been a sacred place for the Jews. Although eventually, in the history of the chosen people, we'll see they only had one sacred place, which was Jerusalem. Now, as soon as they get over into the promised land, they celebrate the Passover. And it also says, from that day onwards, they ate the produce of Canaan. They had no more manna. In other words, the desert experience is now over. Now they're in a cultivated land where they can eat the crops that other people have grown. They can eat not the food of the desert, the diet of the desert, which is manna, but they can eat the corn and things like that, which are grown in the promised land. So the Passover is, of course, a Passover, the Red Sea, the passing over of the angel of death, but passing over from the desert into the promised land, which will bring all sorts of problems in its wake, as we will see. The celebration of the Passover, the celebration of the first Passover in the land of Israel, is incredibly important for the people. And the celebration of our Passover, that's to say, the celebration of the Holy Mass, doesn't have this geographical resonance that this must have had for the people of Israel. And I imagine for those Jews who live in the diaspora who visit the land of Israel today and celebrate a Passover in Israel, it must have a very great impact on them, because the Passover is linked to this event of settling in the promised land. We don't have a promised land. We're Catholics. We don't have a promised land. We belong everywhere and we belong nowhere. We belong in every single country on the earth, and there are Catholics in every single land on the earth. Some places they have to keep a very low profile. But our true homeland, our promised land, is heaven, the land we share with God. And so the crossing of the Jordan has a great symbolism in Christian reading as the crossing of the boundary into eternal life. And hence we have that famous hymn, which I'm sure you know, when I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fears subside. I am weak, but thou art mighty, etc. And be still by my side, bread of heaven, etc. That wonderful Welsh hymn. The verge of Jordan, the entry into the promised land for us, is a rather different kettle of fish. I hope you, like me and like all our Catholic brethren, feel an enormous longing for the promised land, the land of heaven, which will one day be ours. Joshua is only leading his people into the land of Israel, which I've been there. It's a very nice place, but a land flowing with milk and honey, it can't compare to what lies ahead of us, what lies in heaven. All the best then. Bye for now.